Okay, so we have started recording, Cindy. So I'm gonna go on solo now. I mean, you'll be in the screen only. So please tell us about yourself, your name, where are you from, and your location and where you work.
Okay, I'm Cindy Houston. I am living in Red Lake, Ontario, very northwestern Ontario, and I work in ultrasound, and I travel to the Indigenous remote First Nation communities to provide the ultrasounds.
Thank you, Cindy. The second question, how has your work changed due to the pandemic? 1 second.
Go ahead.
So the question would be like, how has, the work has changed, your work has changed due to pandemic?
Okay. Yes, the workload has increased because then the community members are restricted with travel out of community to go for the ultrasound somewhere else. So more are having them done by me and waiting for my visit.
And when you say that,
every month, I get.
Sorry, you broke down a little bit. Could you say that one more time?
That the workload has increased because people are restricted with travel out unless it's an emergency. So prior to the pandemic, some people were choosing to go to a larger center to have their scans done instead of having it done by me. So they could get a shopping trip and, kind of get out of the community. But traveling out.
So now the fact is they can't go out and they wait for you to do the work. The workload has obviously changed. How do you think the work that you're doing right now as a health worker, it has impacted your relationship with the people that you work with?
Type of work I'm doing, how has it impacted? Yeah, we do a lot of prenatals, so a lot of pregnancies. So it helps improve knowing when their due dates are, knowing if there's any fetal abnormalities or if they're getting high risk and need to go out sooner for their deliveries. So I do think it's an important role. I've been going 4 years, so I feel like they trust me a lot more now than they did at the beginning. I'm not sure.
Speaking of trust, and in the beginning, you mentioned that you work with the Indigenous community. Understandably, the Indigenous communities have a long history of oppression and violence, which would very likely make them distrust government or people from mainland. You as a health worker, what has been the most useful thing that actually builds that trust, that builds that relationship? I think Cindy, let me be on the screen. I think it's very awkward when you're alone.
Okay.
What do you think? What do you think?
Sure.
Now, I'm sorry, and I'm just trying to be helpful. I just don't know, because sometimes it feels like maybe we are struggling.
Okay. Yeah. So you're asking me like what has impacted it the most?
No. So the question is, the Indigenous communities, historically speaking, they
Right.
have reasons not to trust government, not to trust people
I
from
think it's the
mainland.
consistent. Yeah, I think it's been the consistent traveling. So seeing the same person and knowing that I'm still coming back. There's a lot of other staff that has a large turnaround with dentists and nursing and such. So I think the trust has been developed because I continue to travel there. And some of them I've seen them for up to 3 pregnancies already now.
Oh, wow. Okay. Um,
To know me, recognize me. Yeah.
and what are some of the, in your experience, things that you have seen firsthand? What are some of the challenges or difficulties that these communities actually deal with on a daily basis?
Um, each community has some unique things. The most common thing is the drinking water isn't drinkable. So they're supposed to drink for their ultrasound and fill their bladder. So sometimes they drink when they show up because they don't have bottled water at home. Yeah, so the drinking water has been huge because I didn't realize in Canada we still had places that didn't have their own drinking water. Some of the homes in one of the communities I go to doesn't even have running water, so they have to haul the water. So
Wow, that's in Canada.
yeah, it's pretty major, and I hadn't realized until it's a fact. So they have outhouses still and haul water for cooking and cleaning. And that water's not drinkable, so they have to boil it if they want to drink it.
Cindy, you grew up in Canada and you've gone to school here. How has your understanding of the Indigenous community prior to actually going in that community and working with them and actually working after working with them? How has
Well,
your
I'm with Western
understanding,
Ontario.
sorry?
Changed. Yeah. My upbringing was there is a percentage of Indigenous people in my community. So I have friendships with and went to school with several. But going to their actually communities where they're remote, it is a lot different. They're
And,
most
and when you say remote, where exactly are they located? If you want to give us, kind of, an idea.
so yeah. So I go by plane. One of the communities can take 3 hours to fly to from where I am.
I'm sorry, Cindy, you broke down. Could you please tell me one more time where is it
Um,
located?
well, there are 5 to 7 that I usually visit regularly, and the closest one to me is Pikanchkum, and then the next largest one that I visit regularly is Sandy Lake. So Pikanchkum is fairly close, so it's only a 20-minute flight, but Sandy from here north.
Hmm.
Mhm.
So during the pandemic, of course, you have mentioned, about the challenges these indigenous communities encounter with safe drinking water. How has the pandemic impacted the indigenous community? What in obviously every community is impacted uniquely, given
Right.
their situations. How has the pandemic impacted the indigenous communities in Canada?
I think it froze up at the end.
Okay, sorry. So the
How has it impacted them, you think?
yeah. So how the pandemic has impacted the indigenous communities of Canada?
So I'm not up there all the time either, so I don't know if I can speak for them as much, but I do see that they're having harder access to get their groceries because they only have usually one store per community. But in the past, they would go out on their own to get groceries, like, maybe only once a month, but they would still go, and then they could get to a larger center. And they have difficulties with online shopping because they don't always have a visa. And then um, the mail goes to one of our cities, Thunder Bay first, and it doesn't fly up until there's a full cargo flight. So the mail can take a long time to get there. So instantly as I would if I ordered online. And a lot of things go missing. Um, So definitely getting any sort of their resources of just baby supplies and food and groceries. The gas prices are very high, so they usually would fill up a lot of gas when they'd come to town. But they don't have that option anymore, so they have to purchase it at usually the Northern Store is a Northwest company out of Winnipeg, Manitoba, I believe. So the prices are very high at the store. So I think getting their own supplies has been hard, and then just not leaving. So then they're very isolated because they usually like to get out and they do, their shopping, go to a movie, go to the casino and get to stay at a hotel and have a nice hot shower. Um, you know, so they're not getting those that they were used to experiencing. Yeah, for some of their appointments, if it's an urgent medical, are seeing like a specialist that they can't do over the telemedicine, then they are still traveling. If they travel, they have to isolate for 14 days upon return at an isolation center. So that's not easy. So a lot of times they'll cancel because they don't want to do that. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So people are missing important appointments because they have a fear of the COVID. When I get back, I can't just go home because there's too many families in my home. So I have to isolate at that center. And then they hear stories about how is that center. It's some trailers that were brought in, I believe, by, government funding to have places for them to sleep. So then they have to have security there and be monitored. Yeah. So the conditions they said haven't been as great. I'm not sure if all of the communities are the same for all of them, but it's difficult to not be at home with your family and all your kids. So they have to go out to deliver the babies. And so that's hard for them because they go a bit early. And if they don't have it on time, like there's a lot of waiting away from home. And they are allowed one escort, so someone can go with them. But sometimes, they have to decide who's going to stay back to watch the other children because they can't bring them all. And then when they get back, they have to isolate away from all the other. Pretty major, considering like the differences. If I went somewhere and had to isolate, I could isolate at home.
Wow. So when you say, and this part, I'm very curious to know that you mentioned, 1 second, I'm just hearing this sound, the wind sound. When you say that the government has brought trailers for the Indigenous communities for isolating or resting, what exactly is it? Could you tell a bit more about it?
Yeah, like they brought up like mobile homes, almost units, and then they put them in a specific location on a site so that they're in a separate. And when they arrive at the airport from their travel medical, they get picked up by a special isolation vehicle, and they get their meals, 3 meals a day, but they can't leave there for 14 days.
Okay.
So it has single rooms and shared bathroom and things like that. And all the different communities have, their own. I haven't gone in. I only went in one. Oh, sorry.
No, it is.
I'll go in the other room. Might bark.
No worries.
Okay.
You are in Thunder Bay now, right?
No, I am in Red Lake.
Okay. The internet connection is excellent. I mean, I don't know. How?
Oh, okay. So, but up north, when you were trying to call me, I was up north for work, and internet and the north is a bit in and out. So.
So, and that's an excellent point you have mentioned. In terms of internet, in pandemic, we have never been so dependent on internet the way we are now in our life, our healthcare. So in order to participate in, the online world, we need to have equipment, we need to have internet access, we also need to have some kind of digital skills. We not,
Hmm.
um, how do you think the pandemic has impacted life, like your life, people that you work, their life, in terms of this digitalness, like using internet, using, all of these tools?
Um, yeah, we've been impacted. Our school online, and one of my daughters is a educational assistant at a school, so she also had to teach at home online, while her younger brothers are both online taking their classes. So we have to try to stay in different rooms so everyone can hear their own laptop going on. Yeah, and then when we have three streaming like that live, the connections aren't as good. And it's difficult for kids to stay online that long also. So I would be honest, and mine don't always attend the full day. And I just let them go outside instead and take a break because it is a lot of screen time. And then I find they're laying and they're eating and they're not always focusing. So I think it's worthwhile for it to be a bit shorter at a time, and then they can go back and forth. But um, and I have some construction going on here.
Mhm.
There's banging out. It cut
Sorry. Sorry, Cindy.
out.
You
Sorry.
froze.
The
Sorry.
the internet that was so great. Yeah, so it wasn't as great.
Okay. Okay. Sorry. I mean, so towards the end, the internet
Oh
froze
yeah, so for
completely.
that the digital,
So it
yes.
totally froze in the end, towards the end. So you were saying that how your children, their life, your life, how it has all become dependent. You were saying something incredibly important, that how it's also, important that, how the internet is impacting your children's upbringing, your growth, their growth, etc. Could you say that one more time? Because the internet froze.
Oh, it froze. Just that I wasn't I'm trying to put this in a better spot. I had to come in here because they're construction. Um, just that the length of time online is a lot. A full day of school is too long on screen time, and just listening to the teacher. And I try to pull my job away to the north for work. So then they're independently doing it on their own. So it's not a lot getting done then. They're trying, but yeah, so let them take breaks because they're not focusing and they're fidgeting, they're laying down. It's a lot of listening. I went in my son's grade 10 high school class the one day, and the teacher was like writing on it, and it was time consuming. And then I said to him, "You should write her a message." And he's like, "Mom, don't. I never talk to her." And I typed in there and I said, "Maybe you should have it pre-written and just read it to us." And
Mhm,
then she just kind of wrote back that she didn't understand. And then my son was like, "Do not touch anything on here, Mom."
mhm.
He's like, "I don't communicate with the teacher." So I'm like, okay. But
Hmm.
yeah, and as a high school teenage boy, that's what, yeah, he doesn't or participate in the class. He doesn't want his camera on, so it's never on. He has to have it on at the beginning for attendance to say hello, then they know it's him, and then he's allowed to turn it off.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Wow.
and then the younger son is grade 6, so he's keeping his camera on. He doesn't mind, but the older kids, they don't want all the kids to see them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a teacher. Tell me about it. I've been teaching for the past 20 years.
Like
So.
I look, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
I
I
know.
mean,
And I see the numbers are low with who's logged in, which is very unfortunate.
yeah. Now, if I may ask you, a few questions, like, how pandemic has impacted. We all are impacted by it, and we all are trying to learn how to navigate our social relationship, how to maintain our friendship. I mean, we are social beings, but we can't really
Hmm.
hang out with people. We can't go see our friends. So, how has the pandemic um, impacting your social, mental, emotional life? How is it impacting you?
Well, I still am fortunate enough that when I go to work, I have coworkers. So I can socialize at work, you know, sort of like we can have conversations. We all have our mask on. But outside of work, on and off, they've had lifted some of the restrictions. Maybe it was before Christmas, we had the hospital in my local town. We had a group of friends do a paint night together because we were allowed to do 10 indoors. So that was good, but I feel like that's the only time we've gotten together.
Wow.
So, and our restaurants are only takeout, so we couldn't go and sit there. My dog's barking.
No, no worries at all. I mean, I think it's wonderful that your dog is barking, that this is home. This is what's life is, right? I mean, that's how
Let's
it's the new
go.
normal.
I could go let him out. I'll go let him out.
Sure. Okay, no worries.
Okay, sorry. The
No
dog
worries
is
at all.
out. I shut the door because my son's listening to his class.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Um, so I'm trying to picture um, that where you live and where you work, and you mentioned that you take a plane, you take a flight to go to where you work.
Yes. And the pandemic changed the flights. I'm not allowed on the regular passenger flights. I take a charter now. So I'm usually by myself in the plane, or there could be some other medical workers getting a flight, and all the lab bags are transported on our charter.
So
So it's lab
when you
blood work
said
drop
charter
off.
plane, sorry, Cindy, when you said charter
Yeah,
plane, again, I'm not familiar with it. Is that so? Does it mean like an entire plane? You are just flying there with few equipment and few other fellow colleagues, health workers?
right. So it's just a smaller plane. Sometimes I'm in just a four-seater, and it's just the lab bags that are getting dropped off to the communities and getting picked up. So sometimes it takes a while to get to where I am going because they stop and you need to the lab bags until we get to the one I'm getting out on. Mhm.
Hmm.
And so it's to keep things safer so that I'm not exposed to anybody that's been out for medical.
Hmm. Mm, one of the questions, it's I mean, I'm doing my PhD in rural studies, and one of the things that we obviously a lot of the time study is that how the understanding of the rural is that people from the rural areas in their journey of life, a lot of people, they like, I was born in a small village in Bangladesh, and right now, I'm 12,000 miles away from my home, 12 hours of almost time difference. So it's a long way from home. All my siblings, like I come from a huge family. I have like 11 siblings, like we have 28 children in next generation. So you can imagine
Wow. Yeah.
that what kind of family, what kind of background. And I was born in a completely agrarian community. Like, I would have to walk 8 miles to attend the school. That's how far away was the school for us.
Wow.
So the aspirations that we grew up with is, oh, you go to the city. That's the sign of progress, right? You go to the other place. In case of your aspirations, your journey, what keeps you where you live? What keeps you, like, did any point in time you thought about, oh, I'll move to Vancouver, I'll move to Calgary or Toronto? Why do you live where you live?
So I did leave and went to a smaller city of Thunder Bay for 5 years and worked there. My family, my children missed the small community, and we came back. We enjoy, there's a lake here and we can swim and fish, and it's just down the street. It's not busy here. We can walk everywhere. My kids have freedom. They go on their bikes, wherever they want to bike to. And there's lots of kids on bikes, and it's safe. Freedom. That, you kind of have to, like, say my younger son is 11, like he can't really bike. I don't think he could bike on his own in Vancouver, but but here he's been biking on his own probably since he was 7, going down to swim with his friends down the street. And I could go there to check on them, and there could be 30 kids swimming. So it's quite nice. They have a great summer. And I have my mother's, her grandmother was a British war bride, so she had a large family. So my mom has 9 siblings, I believe, and a lot of the siblings had children that have had children, and people haven't left. Mm-hmm. Some have, but the majority are here. So my kids have cousins, I have cousins. So that's also nice, comfortable to be close to family.
So is it fair to say that it's basically the place where you are, it's the value of the relationship that you have built over the years that makes it a more inviting and welcoming place than moving to probably Vancouver or in Toronto?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we feel safe, and we enjoy our environment of so much forest right here in the lake. Yeah, and we have a boat, so we go fishing in our boat a lot. I'm teaching my kids to drive it. We go to the city, definitely. Vancouver is so beautiful. We went to Toronto 2 years ago now, maybe. Yeah, it was before, and did like 4 days, and I rented a car, and we, did Niagara Falls and everything. So we still get to enjoy the big cities of Canada, but it would be hard to be a single parent and work in ultrasound in a big city, shift work, trying to get everybody to their places. I couldn't imagine it. But yeah, this is an easier lifestyle for sure. Slower pace.
I mean, wonderful. I mean, I have 3 kids.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I couldn't imagine my kids are not with me. They're in Bangladesh. I mean, my kids live with, their cousins, I mean, my kids live with, more than 20 people together. I mean, so they're, isn't there a saying that you need a village to raise a child? So, I mean, I have my village, that's where my kids are growing. And
yeah, nice.
And I don't know, probably because I've come to Canada a lot later in my life. I'm almost 40. So, prior to all of that, life was in Bangladesh. So one of the things that I struggled with coming here is that the individualism that, it's very hyper individualistic society, the Western society, that that can be difficult. I mean, I find it difficult, a lot of the times, to deal with. In terms of aspiration, when you were growing up,
Mhm.
you had probably that feeling in you that, oh, I'll go and live in a city. Then you went and you lived in the city for a little bit and then you came back. Do you see the similar kinds of aspirations in your children or in your nephew and nieces, the next generation kind of children? Like, oh, when I'm going to grow up, I'm going to go to Vancouver,
Mhm.
I'm going to go to Calgary.
Yeah, so we have low numbers. They're staying in the a few. My children, the two older girls, they're finishing school and they're planning to work here. So they're not leaving. And I don't know what the boys will do, but I'm not sure. And like, you see how your children are with all their cousins and that's the other thing. Then financially, it's easier for them if they stay with me and we all stay in the same house instead of everyone trying to start over on their own. Be an easier lifestyle for them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And when you say that, it's easier for them to live there. Now, again, I could be completely wrong. Is that, let's say in Bangladesh or the part of the world that I come from, if you go to India, Pakistan, people, even if they have the financial abilities to live on their own, they'll still choose not to live on their own. They want to live with the entire family, with extended large family, which is an integral
Wow, okay.
part. It's an integral part. But again, that's not universal. Like, a lot of the kids, our education is, we have a lot of Western influence, and we also have started, adopting a lot of the Western values. We want individualism, and so it's a mixed bag.
Yeah.
Your daughters, if they don't move out, if they want to live with you,
Hmm.
what would be your understanding as a mother? What do you think is some of the things that actually motivates them to stay where they are?
Um, they went away to school and they were very lonely and they missed their grandma and their family. And yeah, like they lived alone, so it was pretty significant difference where my house is usually busy because they have siblings and the dog and so it's a bit bigger of a city, so they're not as comfortable to go anywhere either. And they were starting to, but
So I'm sorry, where did they move and lived a little bit? It broke down a little bit.
one went to Sault Ste. Marie for 4 years, and one did Thunder Bay only. So they didn't go to the big cities,
Hmm. Hmm.
but that was big versus here.
And
This
and and what's
community.
the and you said that one work with the early childhood education. What's the line of work, both of them?
So one is a care teacher doing early childhood education, and at a Indigenous center here. And the other daughter is an educational assistant in a school, so she's like a teacher's assistant. And she took a pre-law degree and changed the plan. And so this fall she's going to do teachers college and be a teacher. But she's allowed to do the first year virtually, so she'll stay home this year and only go next year for 1 year to get a coach. The school she works at currently is prepared to hire her right away, so they're excited. And that's the other thing, for as a teacher, there's a lot of jobs here because it's very remote.
Huh. So this is very, at least for me, is very. I wouldn't think that there would be many teaching jobs in rural Ontario, because to me, I'm a teacher myself, so I would be like, oh, the jobs are in Toronto, the jobs are in Calgary. So that's not the case, you're saying?
No, but we get somebody from Toronto that only wants to do a year or two until they get experience, right? And then move on. So there is a lot of turnover.
Okay,
And
huh,
then once in a while we catch one that likes it here and doesn't want to leave.
huh, huh.
So so the schools are very excited when there's a local student becoming a teacher because they know that they could be very long term.
Absolutely, absolutely. So in term sorry, Cindy, in terms of your motivation to become a health worker and
Mhm.
continuing to be a health worker, what were your motivation? Where did you get started? And how, and I'm assuming you've been working in health as a health worker for some time.
Yeah, so I recently celebrated 25 years. I started in X-ray and then I switched into ultrasound. I do both, but in the north I only do ultrasound. I work it casually and I do X-ray and ultrasound there. And I just help as they need me and selectively because the traveling is already busy. So I try not to. I'm starting to work a lot less. Um, I was booking myself almost full time. So I'm starting to realize with with pandemic and not being able to help my kids learn online as easily because I'm too busy. A lot of things have suffered. So I have recently given some notice and I'm going to work less locally and just travel and then be off on my days off. But I did start in, I was going to be physiotherapist and I changed my mind and went into X-ray. And my mom always wanted a nurse, so it didn't work out for me. I wasn't convinced. So, but it was close. I'm still in healthcare.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Hmm. Um,
Very
I'm
rewarding.
sure that
No
you have
regrets.
seen, sorry, I'm sure that you have seen this, in social media a lot, is that people have somehow gone through a lot of realization, understanding that what we're doing to our nature, our
Mhm.
fast-paced life, our idea of constant growth, as so much so that we are actually driving the planet on the verge of extinction. The whole human species, is now under threat. So during the pandemic, what are some of the things that you have realized about your life, about yourself, which you wouldn't actually otherwise had it not been a pandemic?
Um, well, we do miss, we have family in BC that we regularly visit, and we miss being able to just go there. So traveling even just through in our own country has been limited now. Um, yeah, and I just, like I said, I'm working a lot less. I feel like there's a few more things that have become more important. Um, yeah, and all this travel for work, it's very rewarding, but being away isn't always ideal. So I've been thinking about doing other things from home so that eventually I might finish traveling. We'll see. Maybe not. Uh, my kids are getting older, so they're adapting better. But
Yeah.
definitely, I think people are, trying to enjoy and doing the trails that we have available to us. And yeah, we're going to try to commit to being on our boat more often than we usually are.
Mhm.
So,
So one of the things that I really wanted to talk to you about in terms of the pandemic and our collective well-being hugely depends on our clear understanding of science, that we can afford to not understand the health information properly, if we are to survive. And we also know that there's a lot of not true information going around when it comes to vaccination, when it comes to how this pandemic is. You as a health worker, what have you seen in the communities that how, to what extent they're keeping their ears on the ground and actually keeping an eye open to understand the pandemic, the scientific progress, and to adapt with it and adopt it as well?
they were very fortunate and they got the vaccinations early. He's had a higher percentile than others. They did try to promote and educate the community members as the vaccine clinics were starting. Um, there was less wanting the vaccine than the ones that wanted it. Like they didn't have as high a percentile as they thought they would. There is one community, I believe Muskrat Dam was in the 1960s. So they didn't agree with the vaccination as much. And they offered all the medical workers, so they vaccinated me. So I was fully vaccinated by April 7th with both shots of the Moderna. And we had to get Moderna because we're north. So the Pfizer can't travel this far. Educating themselves scientifically, I think, is difficult. They do TV, so everything would be online, learning and connecting to the outside. I don't know how often the community band and council tries to send out education. I know that I work for a health organization called Sioux Lookout First Nations Health Authority, and they have a Facebook page that they try to educate, and I've watched a lot of their videos on there, and it's connecting to all of the reserve communities. So that is to explain was with the vaccine, to explain with why they need to isolate, to explain like a lot of it. So I do think they were trying that way. Yeah, and we're getting nurses that are from all over Canada that work there. So I feel like for protocol wise, we're following all the guidelines of, you know, keeping it safe. And they're also swabbing us. Some communities swab us to make sure that we're negative. When we arrive, we isolate and we've been vaccinated, but there's still a lot of fear that if it's going to come, it'll come from outside, right? So, I hope for their sake, they'll maybe once Ontario lifts the lockdown that we're currently in, I'm hoping they'll allow them to travel a bit, even if it's, you know, make a plan where they get a pass a month or something, because it has been difficult on their mental health. We imagine are related. So I have to pause for a second. Sorry.
Sure.
Sorry. Okay, my apologies. I have construction workers here. I'm getting some new doors installed, and they took over a year to come because of the COVID and the factories and yes, all these different delays. And because we're so remote, there was some delays, and then it did arrive to a larger city, but they were worried about shipping it transport, not the outside. Anyway, I'm finally getting them today.
Oh, okay. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. No,
So that was the hammering, and then he needed to ask me a question just now.
yeah,
So.
that's wonderful. That's not a problem at all. And I think that's one of the things that I'm seeing, that how, I mean, I've heard this many places that we're stronger than we think we are. You know, I mean, when the pandemic in the beginning started, and you know, 1 year, a little bit over 1 year into. So if I were to ask you that, how has, you know, in your personal experience, whether it is your personal life, your children's life, or your neighbor's life, how do you see that, you know, we are becoming resilient, or signs of, like, you know, our ability to rise up to such an unprecedented kind of difficulties that we're going through right now?
I think, and as a small town, that we don't notice the effect doors. They never have more than 25 people, so we don't have to worry about, you know what I mean? Like we don't notice it here as much. I believe, I don't know what we're at now, but at one point, not long ago, we only had 5 total positive cases since March. of last year when it began. So we also have very low numbers. So we're not seeing, a high exposure risk or the effects of, people losing, like I know people, and that nurses have lost some of their family that travel. But personally in Red Lake, I believe we've only lost one community member total. Like,
Mhm.
so we haven't had to feel as strong or as resilient, I think, because we've been fortunate and we've been kind of isolated from the larger effects. And, like I said, my kids are still riding their bikes. And if they close the park, I saw end up closing them. But, so they were at the skate park and then back home. And we've been pretty fortunate.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
And we
Yeah.
usually have the American tourists, and they're not allowed to cross the border right now. So it's not as busy in the summer as it usually is.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that makes a lot of sense. One thing that I forgot to ask you is that you mentioned that some people, let's say from Toronto, they come here, they work in Red Lake for a little bit, and they get their experience, and they go back. And some
Hmm.
people who are from your community also aspire to go outside. So
Right.
over the years, we know that Canada encourages a lot of immigrants to come and settle down because of our population and so on and so forth. How has the community where you live changed over the years in terms of its population, culture, economy, socialization? How has it changed over the years?
So we've been very slow to see a large number of more recent immigration into our small town, but we have seen, I believe it's like an employment sponsorship program. I mean, I don't really know all of it, but I do know that our grocery stores, at our fairly new Tim Hortons and our Subway, we have a lot of immigrants that get sponsored here and are working there, and they're actually staying in homes until they, I guess, stay longer and they want to branch and get their own place. But so we see a lot more culture than we used to. We have a gold mining industry here, so there's how busy that is dependent on the price of gold, which has been good. And an Australian company has recently bought. It gets bought over quite often. So there's I don't know, 700 men I think hired there, and women. There's the numbers probably different. Um, that also brings us a lot of outside cultures, because you get, a geologist that can come from anywhere really, or an engineer, and so they come and they sometimes move here for a few years or more with their family. So then they bring us to my children some culture. So that's nice. But we are not that culturally aware of the outside world,
Hmm.
especially if we don't travel to the city as often.
Okay. Okay. Um,
Yeah,
what
so
would
slower.
be so let's say people, what are some of the things people get wrong about Red Lake? People who don't live there, some of the perceptions probably they, when you went probably visiting a city or someplace and people, oh, you're from place X and Y, and so what are the things that people don't know about Red Lake and that you found it interesting? Huh?
I'm not sure if anyone's told me what they didn't know. Um, I'm not sure. I think that's a hard question.
What, let's say, in other words, what are some of the, let's say, common misperceptions about place like Red Lake? Like, I wouldn't know that in that place you would have a gold mine and 700 people would work there. I wouldn't know that. So,
Yeah, I'm not sure that we did a list of there's a Facebook group that says, like, it's called Red Lake, but Revitalize Red Lake, and they did a list once of 101 things that you can do here, because I think people also think, oh no, like there's nothing to do, because we don't have a movie theater, we don't have a lot of restaurants, we have maybe 4 or 5 total, and they're not chain franchise really. There's I mentioned, there's a Tim Hortons and Subway. That's so you get you know, local people that are running their own restaurants, or the hotels that have a restaurant. I'm not sure if well, sometimes people assume that we have the franchises because they'll ask, well, where's McDonald's? You know, and I'm like, there's no McDonald's. It's the closest one is 2 hours if you want to drive there. You know, and they're like, what? You know, and then sometimes I'm and I'll stop at, you know, McDonald's, and then they go, ew, and I'm like, I never eat there because I never get it. Anyway, yeah, and like Starbucks. My sister moved back recently from Edmonton with her young teenage daughters, and they were in a Starbucks shock for a bit. And yeah, and there's not even one in the closer town to us. I think they have to go all the way to the larger city to get that.
Yeah, I told you that I'm a teacher, so one of the
Perception
things.
would be different.
Sorry, I was saying that, I told you that I'm a teacher. So one of the
Yeah.
things that I continue to do is that I'm very, very actively connected to my community, in the rural Bangladesh. So the pandemic has hit us very differently. And what we do is that, whoever can afford as cheap a smartphone as possible, we get online, try to find out ways to, so that they can buy some data and, get volunteers or like teachers, to talk to them, because we haven't had schools, running almost, 1.5 years. And I don't know how things are, it's going to be a long way. It's going to, and I'm sure that what's happening in India and, what's happening in Bangladesh right now. I've lost family members to COVID. So one of the things that I do is that I talk to people. I say, just talk to this. Let's say if I were to talk to your kids, I would tell them, if you talk to farmer's daughter in rural Bangladesh, and she can fairly decently speak English, there's so much you will learn that you don't know that you couldn't possibly learn from the pages of books. So what has happened is that the pandemic has facilitated very unexpected friendship among people which would be very, very unlikely to happen, like very, very unlikely to happen. So that brings the whole discussion that basically what is a rural area? You could be living in Red Lake, but because of the digital infrastructure and the connection, you could probably be connected to, I don't know, quote unquote high culture, or pretty much with the entire world.
Wow.
I'm sorry, that's part of my my dissertation. I got excited and I just wanted to tell you, which is not.
Yeah, no, that is very exciting. Our ultrasound conference, we have a Canadian one annually, and I did have to attend virtually, and that was the first time. So interesting. They had some small chat rooms, and we went off into groups at times. And then, yeah, quite a few people were fascinated that I travel to remote communities, and of my colleagues. And so they were from all over Canada, and I wouldn't have actually personally spoke with them like that if I had gone and attended the conference, because you just go and listen to each subject. And dinner usually is a really neat way to connect, and more personable. Yeah, it's changing.
Yeah, absolutely. Cindy, thank you very much. I will go through the footage and I'll see, what I can cut and you can edit and can make it a coherent story. And do you have Instagram, or like where you have photos usually, like your life, your. So I was thinking that a video plus probably write up a story together, and to make something that is useful.
Okay. Instagram, and I have. Yeah, if I don't know, I feel like if it wasn't what you wanted or anything, we could have another meeting if you want, or
Yeah.